Welcome to the spine-tingling world of our unholy tales, where fear takes its darkest form and every shadow holds a chilling secret. We are your guides through the twisted and nightmarish tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat, clutching your pillow for dear life. Get ready to embark on a journey into the abyss of your deepest fears as we explore the realms of the supernatural, the macabre, and the unknown. The floorboards creaked under my feet as I lugged the final box into my new studio apartment. I set it down with a heavy thud and wiped the sweat from my brow. This was it, my first place all to myself. No noisy roommates, no nosy landlords, just blessed solitude. I'd spent the last few years practically living as a shut-in after a breakdown left me with crippling social anxiety. I barely left my bedroom in the apartment I'd shared with a few old college friends, but when they all moved on to marriages, careers, and kids, the lease ran out. I realized with my freelance proofreading income, I could just afford a small studio in a pretty run-down part of the city, but the isolation and privacy would be worth it. In the following days, I settled into my new home. I stayed inside for the most part, only occasionally venturing out wearing a hoodie and headphones to stock up on frozen dinners and ramen noodles. The old apartment building was noisy, the plumbing clanked, the walls were thin, but it was mine until the haunting started. It began slowly at first. I'd wake with a gasp in the middle of the night, hearing footsteps creaking outside the apartment door, but peering through the peephole revealed only an empty hallway. Then came the scratching noises in the walls, like fingernails raking across the plaster. When I knocked back, they would stop for a moment, before starting up somewhere else. I convinced myself it was just pipes settling or mice in the walls, but deep down I knew better. There was something lingering in this building, something that did not want me here. The final straw came a week later. I awoke to use the bathroom and felt an unnatural chill in the air. When I flipped on the light switch, I stifled a scream. The entire bathroom was flooded with black water, strange mold climbing up the walls. The liquid seemed to move unnaturally, swaying back and forth, and there was a putrid smell wafting up from its inky depths. I slammed the door and rushed back to bed, pulling the covers tight over me. This was no plumbing issue. Something was very wrong with this apartment. A profound feeling of dread settled over me. Maybe my isolation wasn't worth enduring a haunting. Over the next few days, the activity only intensified. The lights would flicker rapidly even when the power company insisted there were no issues. Foul smells emanated from every corner. I'd hear a baby crying through the vents deep in the night. And I no longer felt alone here. I could sense an invisible presence following me room to room. One evening, as I boiled water for some ramen, it happened. First, a loud bang echoed from the bathroom, the door slamming open violently. Suddenly, all the kitchen drawers rattled open and closed rapidly, silverware and tools clattering. The lights cut out, leaving me in darkness. Then 2 red eyes appeared in the blackness right before me, staring menacingly. I cried out in fear, backing myself against the oven. The mocking sound of disembodied laughter filled the room, low and taunting at first, then rising to a piercing cackle. It was clear whatever was haunting me was not just a lost spirit, but something demonic. Finally, the laughter ceased and the scarlet eyes vanished along with the unseen presence. The lights flickered back on soon after. Crockery from the open shelves lay smashed on the floor. My palms prickled where my fingernails had dug into the flesh. This was the last straw. I couldn't tough this out on my own anymore. At first light, I was calling an exorcist. I scoured the internet for someone reputable, weeding out the con artists from the legit supernatural services. Many companies had flashy websites advertising 24/7 emergency exorcisms. But I settled on a lone man calling himself Vincent, with a plain black and white web page simply listing his contact info. His testimonials seemed authentic. He had cleansed homes, hotels, even a hospital ward. This was my best bet. I arranged for Vincent to come the very next morning. His voice on the phone was kind, deep and soothing. He assured me we would get to the bottom of this. I spent the rest of the night sitting anxiously on the couch, every creak and groan from the haunted building causing me to jump or cry out. With the sunrise, I finally dozed off from pure exhaustion, still sitting up clutching a sofa pillow. A loud knocking jolted me awake. I shuddered to see it was completely dark outside once more. Disoriented, I glanced at my phone. It was just past midnight. The sharp rapping echoed again from my apartment door. Heart thudding, I approached slowly. "Hello," I called timidly. "It's Vincent," came a muffled voice. "The exorcist, you called for an emergency visit?" An icy finger of fear tickled my spine. Why was he here in the middle of the night? I had scheduled him for the morning. "Just a second," I called back. Hands trembling, I grasped the chain lock and opened the door a few inches. It was difficult to make out many details in the dim light of the hallway, but I could see a tall, broad-shouldered figure looming there, dressed all in black. He smiled, his teeth unexpectedly sharp. "Vincent?" I repeated cautiously. I didn't like this one bit. "You need to let me in if you want my help," he replied. "I can only cleanse this place from the inside." His words had a strange echo to them. I wrinkled my brow, uncertainty rising by the minute. I think there's been a misunderstanding," I muttered. "I didn't ask you to come here tonight. Please just honour our morning appointment." Vincent snarled, banging his fist loudly on the door, making me jump. The chain lock clattered violently with the force. "You called for my aid, wretched girl," he growled, "and I have arrived. Stand aside, or there will be consequences." Adrenaline flooded my system. I knew now, without a doubt, this was not the exorcist I had spoken to earlier. I slammed the door shut, securing both chain locks. My heart pounded as I backpedaled away from the entrance. Vincent continued to snarl and spit curses from the hallway. He banged violently on the door over and over. To my horror, the wood began to visibly crack from the force of the blows. "Little fool," the demonic voice raged. "I could have helped you. Now you will suffer at the hands of what you have already invited in." At this, to my shock, the banging ceased abruptly. The hallway grew silent again. Vincent apparently gone. Uneasy quiet filled my dark apartment once more. But somehow, the evil presence lurking within felt stronger than ever before. I did not sleep again that night. When daylight came at last, I was ragged from anxiety. But I breathed a sigh of relief, seeing the real exorcist Vincent pull up in a nondescript sedan right on schedule. He exited his car slowly, glancing up at the old apartment building warily. I waved at him anxiously from my second-floor window. When I opened the door to let him inside, the events of the previous night flooded over me. I quickly explained the strange demonic visitor. Vincent nodded calmly as I spoke, his handsome face filled with empathy. He was younger than his voice suggested on the phone, probably in his late 30s. His sage green eyes seemed to stare into my soul and set me at ease. "Unfortunately, this happens sometimes with troubled buildings," he said softly. "Dark spirits masquerade to gain entry, but we will unravel whatever truly lies within." He blessed the interior of the apartment first with burning sage, the sweet, pungent smoke somewhat soothing my frayed nerves. We then settled down cross-legged across from each other in the living room. He gently grasped both of my hands, allowing my anxious energy to flow into him. Softly chanting ancient incantations, Vincent gradually slipped into a trance-like state. I observed silently as his eyeballs rolled back, leaving just the whites visible beneath fluttering eyelids. The room grew heavy with unnatural darkness not of this earth. A strange tingling crept up my spine. "There is a portal here," Vincent said suddenly. But the voice was not his own. It seemed to emanate from elsewhere in an unearthly tone. A weak spot permitting crossover between realms. It has remained undiscovered until the coming of this sensitive soul. I shivered at his words, both terrified and intrigued. The lights in the room began to pulsate oddly. "Tell me who or what is tormenting this woman," Vincent demanded in that same otherworldly voice. A distant rumbling echoed his query, like faraway thunder. "Ancient things, long before man walked the earth," came the reply at last. "Banished here. They have tasted her light. They wish to devour it. She must not remain, or she shall become the doorway." A profound sorrow gripped me then. I had so hoped to make this little studio into a safe haven. But it seemed that would never happen now. My misery was short-lived, however. In the next instant, chaos erupted. The room was plunged into sudden darkness. I felt an electrical charge in the air. Vincent was ripped violently from my grasp as freezing, unseen hands enveloped me. I cried out, staggering backwards, but immediately struck the apartment wall behind. Cruel, soft laughter echoed from all sides, gleeful and taunting. In the blackness, I perceived quick flashes of glowing violet eyes and rows of tiny razor-like teeth snarling silently at me. "The intruders must be given their tithe," an inhuman chorus of voices demanded in unison. They spoke with an unsettling liquid quality, as if gargling fouled water. I grasped desperately for any object I could wield as a weapon. But my hands only swiped through empty air. The laughter continued as hideous, decayed faces materialized inches from mine, then disappeared again, playing tricks on my vision. Frigid, spectral hands clawed repeatedly at my ankles and legs. "Stay back!" I screamed hysterically. "Get away from me!" My knees buckled terror as skeletal fingers tangled themselves in my hair, yanking brutally at my scalp. I pleaded and sobbed, but the assault continued, growing ever more aggressive. They were an inch from tearing me to pieces, but then came a roar, deep and guttural, from Vincent across the room. I perceived a blinding aura suddenly flare to life in the pitch blackness. An unholy chorus of shrieks filled the apartment as the attacking spirits recoiled from that hallowed light. In the fiery glow now emanating from his silhouette, I witnessed Vincent produce a small glass vial from his jacket pocket. With an animal grunt, he hurled the container to the floor at his feet. It shattered on impact, liquid splashing across the aged floorboards. The reaction was instant chaos. A rush of shadows swirled toward that singular point, the freed entities rendered powerless by the strange elixir. A cacophony of unnatural wails resounded as the ghosts clawed desperately at air, trying to avoid being sucked down into that tiny broken trap. But their efforts were fruitless. Within seconds, every last shred of darkness had been sucked down through the floorboards with a deafening crack. Blinding white light filled the room, and I shielded my eyes as I beheld a spectral whirlwind rage before me. Then, as quickly as it began, the fury ebbed, leaving behind an unnatural stillness hanging in the air. My ragged breath panted out in deafening rasps in the following silence. Gradually, I lowered my arm from my face, scarcely able to believe the entities were truly banished. But somehow I sensed the apartment was well and truly clear once more. Across the room, Vincent stood firm, slowly straightening from a combat stance. The fiery aura still flickered subtly around his silhouette. With the calming hiss of a snuffed candle, the protective beacon extinguished itself. He was at my side in an instant. "Forgive me," he urged, gripping my shoulders firmly. "I allowed things to progress too far, nearly let them have you." His sage green eyes bore intensely down into mine. I nodded in mute shock, still trying to process all that had transpired. After a moment, I touched his hands reassuringly. There were no words to thank someone for saving my immortal soul. Sunrise was breaking on the horizon when Vincent finally took his leave. The haunted energy had lifted from the tiny studio completely. For the first time since moving in, I felt totally at peace there. I offered Vincent the entirety of my meagre bank account as payment, but he refused it, and any further hospitality I tried to press upon him. This was his life calling, not just a job. His duty brought him all the reward he required. We parted ways with a meaningful, lingering hug. I sensed I might cross this stranger's path again one day, but for now I finally had found my own little haven, haunted no more.